today to have the Reverend Michael Pipkin and his family here with us. He came up and led us in a retreat on Friday and is now going to be preaching to us. So go ahead.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It really is a pleasure to be with you all. Thanks for your hospitality, for the warm reception, the warm welcome, and for this glorious place. Grand Marais is lovely, and we have traipsed and crawled, over rocks and boulders and water. I mean, we have been all over, and yet have only seen a tiny fraction of the beauty of this place. And so, thanks for sharing that with me and my family. As Mary Ellen said, my name is Michael Pipkin. I serve here in the Episcopal Church in Minnesota as we like to say, your missioner for missional management. I serve for you all, and I just skipped right over that missional manager thing. It's maybe the goofiest title in all of Christendom. I get that. I'm the only one, so here we are. That's what we get. I begin there because I think it's important for you to know a little bit about my lens and my perspective on the world. I believe wholeheartedly that what God has done in creation and in calling us and in gifting us and bringing us forth into being as church is every bit about providing for us as it is about that calling and about that giftedness. So we are called, we are gifted, we are all of that, but we are, as my Southern Baptist friends like to say, we are provision for God's work. We have been given everything we need. So I look through that lens and I see that the church is enormously rich in every way, shape, and form. Even those who have nothing and are in extreme poverty have the depths of God's riches, because if we look at our gospel today, we hear that part about storing up for yourselves treasures in heaven, right? So the church, just by its very nature, is full of the resources of God for going beyond our walls and going into our communities to do the work that, by the way, God is already doing in those places, and He's inviting us to join in and be a part of. So I come to you today as your missioner for missional management. I think in these ways, I imagine resources, and I actually work a lot with people in the church and church properties, and as I say, the pennies, because if you're not into alliteration as a preacher, you have nothing. So the people, the property, and the pennies. But there is so much more, indeed, for us to work with. And I believe that together we can search out ways to use all that God has given to us. And in my travels, I get around, probably at this point I've seen 80 or so of the Episcopal churches in Minnesota, and I bump into a similar theme in the places where I go. And that's this feeling of decline, this feeling of scarcity, this feeling of what is happening to the church. I should say I've felt that in almost every place but one. I've been to some of the largest places in Minnesota and they have riches beyond your imagination. They have resources. They have all kinds of things. And all they do is lament. And this is on tape. Not all they do, but much of what I do. What I hear is, we have all of this. How can we get more? They want to build. They want to grow. They want to plant and till and harvest. But what they're doing, kind of like if you were in church last Sunday, you heard the story of the farmer who wanted to tear down his barns and build larger ones so that he could store more and more grain. And friends, this is the church of today. We tend to do this. You all are in a different place. There aren't many churches who have chosen not to have barns or buildings. There are not many places that have chosen what I think is a harder life of itinerant churchhood, if that's such a thing. When I gathered with the Bishop's Committee on Friday, one of the things I reflected with them about was the fact that the wilderness of Spirit of the Wilderness is it's either maybe the wilderness of the Old Testament or the wilderness of the New Testament. It's one of those. Wilderness has a long theme of history in the church. But for me, I kept imagining a church sort of like the Old Testament, taking down its tent and moving somewhere and pitching it again, and tearing it down and moving it somewhere else and pitching again. And it was really about finding a new context and always following God deeper into where God was already moving. And this is the spirit of the wilderness. This is the work that you all do. I told them, and I will tell you, you cannot know how enormously proud of you we are. And I say that not because we gave you life, not because we have really done all that much to bring you into existence. In fact, sometimes... But I say that because we get the enormous honor of being in relationship with you. We get to know you, and we get to serve with you, and we get to continue to do God's work together in this great field. Our gospel this morning has familiar words. Do not be afraid. I wonder if you know how many times in Scripture that phrase appears.
365.
365. One for each day, unless it's a leap year, and then, well, you've got a day, right? Every 4 years. Who is it that often speaks these words? Jesus? Or the angels? In fact, every time an angel appears in Scripture, the first phrase is some utterance of, do not be afraid, or have no fear, or fear not. Do not be afraid. You are doing wonderful work. And the work continues. This theme that came through Luke, it's began last week, it's still sort of woven in this week's gospel lesson, is about being ready. Don't be fooled. This lesson isn't about staying up all night and waiting. This isn't about being the watchman and ringing the bell. Those are Advent sort of things. We can talk about those later. This lesson is about being ready. It's about having all of your affairs in order so that when the Lord does come, you are ready to join God in that work. If we're storing up treasures for ourselves in heaven, how is that treasure known here on earth? How do we know that? We know it echoed in the words of Isaiah, also from this morning. If we are calling forth for justice, if we are ransoming the prisoners, if we are setting those free, if we are undoing oppression, if we are feeding the hungry, if we're clothing the naked, if we're proclaiming good news and doing good news, we are more and more storing up treasures for ourselves. And we are prepared. We cannot save. We cannot build. We cannot hoard for ourselves the treasures of this world and expect to be ready when God comes. We cannot expect to be ready at all when the Lord invites us into our neighborhood to serve those who are in need. Store up for yourselves treasures in heaven by doing, by being, by embodying all that you are in this world as church. I give thanks for you. I give thanks that I get to do this work with you, that I get to know you, get to be in relationship with you. But even more so, I give thanks for those who are fed by you and clothed by you, for those who know Jesus because of you. Thanks be to God for who you are and for the treasures you have in heaven.